Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Design Your Own Forms. My name is Ann Stevenson. I'm the product manager for the Jonas Construction Enterprise product, and I'll be showing you Design Your Own Forms today. So let's start by talking about how we actually install Design Your Own Forms in Jonas. This is a module that comes with the software. It was back in the day, about 7 years ago. It was one of our first .NET applications. And basically all you have to do as a user is you have to deploy it on each workstation or the workstations of anybody who would be printing any of the documents that are coming out of Design Your Own Forms. So it would have to be deployed on all of those workstations. If you're working in an environment where you're using Citrix or you're using terminal services, you would deploy it on that particular server. In terms of the requirements as well, and let's just go through this and we'll talk about that a little bit. Get into there. There we go. So the first thing that you would do in your world, and again, I'm not going to show you the file path on mine because my local is set up a little bit differently, but essentially what you would be doing is you would be going to wherever you have Jonas installed, and for most people that would be on their J drive, and you would go into that GJC Win folder. There's a Tools folder that's located in there, and then within the Tools folder, you would select Design Your Own Forms and then Install. And when you do that, it's going to take you into another folder, which is basically going to give you these three choices. So it'll have the INI file. But what you want to do is you want to click on this Setup EXE, which is the executable. And what that does is it actually launches the program installation for you. And it does so on your local. So you would do that on each workstation where you would go and you would go to the J drive and you would basically just execute this file. It usually takes about between 45 seconds to 2 minutes. The one thing that you might find when you're running it, and first of all, I would always say run it as an administrator just to be safe. But the other thing that could happen in very rare instances is that you're on a workstation that doesn't have .NET Framework installed. Less and less common because so many applications use it. But in the event that you actually don't have .NET Framework installed, we'll bump you over to Microsoft to grab that particular program. It'll run the installation for you and then come back and do Design Your Own Forms, only because it's too large to include it in our installation here. So that would have your product installed. Obviously, and we have it in red here on the screen. You don't have to have your users out of Jonas to do this. You can just do it while other things are going on because it's something that's sort of running beside Jonas. It's not like doing a version update or a product update where you have to have everybody out. Now, to run Design Your Own Forms, we do need some supporting players. So basically, what we do with this application is we create XML templates, and then we load them with all of the information from Jonas, and then we convert that into a PDF. So it's a bit of a process, but the nice thing about doing it that way is that because we're creating an XML documents are actually Word documents or a type of Word template. So anything that you can do from a presentation standpoint in Word, you can now do and Design Your Own Forms. And I'll go through that a little bit when we get in there so that you can see that in terms of being able to do things like, change your font or make it, bigger, bolder, italicized, different colors, whatever you want it to be. And when you do that, then the actual document prints out following those characteristics, which is really nice. If you want something, where you want to do different things with your fonts or you want to focus on branding and that kind of thing, it gives you an opportunity to create a really professional looking document. When you come in to Design Your Own Forms for the first time or any time really, this is essentially what the screen looks like until you actually start selecting templates to work with. And you can see up at the top we have some menu items. So we have File, View, Windows, and Help. We do the same thing with our little icons. But what you're going to want to do really when you come into here is click on the Jonas template folders. And what that'll do, or folder, pardon me, is it'll give you a listing of all of the templates that currently exist in Design Your Own Forms. And you can see that list is quite large and it grows continuously. We're always adding new documents to it. I know in 12.5 we added lien waivers, and I believe we also added, it'll come to me, subcontract payment certificates. So anyways, I'm going to pick one of the originating forms in here, which was the purchase order form, for us to play around with today. And the reason I like purchase orders, especially for playing with, is that it's easy for people to go and run them in Jonas, and it shows us everything that we need to see when we're in here. Actually, I skipped a step, pardon me. I am going to close that because I do want to make a change. The one thing I did want to show you before we come in here, I should just have a blank document, is before we start, what I usually recommend in terms of being able to navigate, it's really helpful if you move your quick access toolbar to below the ribbons. And I usually leave it there all the time. I had moved it just for the purposes of showing you in this webinar. So typically, decide what you want. I just like the undo and redo. It makes it easier to edit. And then I usually just say show them below the ribbon so that they're down here. It makes it easier when you're actually in Design Your Own Forms to make changes within the template if you want to go back and forth. All right, so sorry I missed that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up a template because I want you to see what happens when we come in here and we do that. And typically when you're doing this and your trainer is working with you, this is the first thing that they'll do with you anyways, is just start with a standard template. And I always recommend that you start with the standard template. This sort of gives you a framework to work within, might give you some ideas. You may still have some things that you decide to add, but it's a lot easier, especially until you're skilled at this. It's a lot easier than going in and just having a blank page where you go in and build everything. The other thing I usually recommend that people do is if you're an accounting type like I am, this is probably not your forte. Find somebody who's good at marketing, somebody who's got a really nice design bent to them, who can do cool stuff like that, and chances are they'll know Word better than you do as well. And let them focus on the branding and what these forms need to look like. I know I had a couple instances when I used to train back in the day where those were definitely the best results, where they had somebody who knew marketing and understood branding and graphics and how to make things look really pretty, and they would put together all of the forms for the company basically, and you'd have a really great look on all of the documents. So I absolutely recommend that that's the person who does this. Don't have the controller do it. No offense to any controllers out there, but I know from my own experience, much better at Excel than Word. And one of the things that we did to facilitate that process, because a lot of the times if that's the person that you're using to do these forms, they're not necessarily the person who actually knows how to run Jonas. And one of the things that you have to do when you're testing your forms previously was you have to actually go and run the form in Jonas to see what it looked like. So one of the things that we did, and I'll show it to you once we've done a little bit, is down here at the bottom, we've added a preview. So basically what we did was we put in a data set that's sitting in the background and Design Your Own Forms, and you can go in and do what you want to your form, and then you click on the preview, and it pre-fills it with our data, and you can see what it lays out like. So it's a much easier way, to see how you're doing as you're going through. So a couple other things that happened when I opened up this template, all of a sudden the whole screen came to life. So the first thing I'll point out is just up here around the top, you'll notice that we have a Word menu. And what the program did was it went and it basically looked at the version of Word that you're running on the workstation that it's installed in, and it said, okay, so that's the version of Word that I'm going to show here. In my instance, I'm running Word 2013. So it's using a menu that's appropriate to that particular version of Word. Were I running Word 2003, it would be showing the menu appropriate to that, 2007 or 10, whatever it happens to be. The one thing I will mention with regard to Word, obviously Word is necessary to run this particular application, but the other thing that you have to be mindful of is that it has to be a full version of Word and not an abridged version. So for example, if you're using like Office for Student or Home and Business or Home and Office, I think it's called, those ones don't include the mail merge feature or the merge feature that's used when we're doing that conversion and we're pulling in the data and then creating a PDF. So it's not, the abridged versions of Word will not work with this particular application. So it needs to be a full version, either basic, professional, and I think image, that one works as well. I've seen it working just fine. So Just keep that in mind. You also need a PDF reader of some sort, and those are always free downloads, so you could do Adobe Reader, you could do Foxit Reader, and just download those, and again, that should be on each workstation. If you're running this application in a terminal services or a Citrix environment, you'll have to have a multi-user license for Word. So just keep that in mind as well for those particular situations. So once we're in here, as I said, we have our Word menu. If we go over to the right-hand side, you can start to see how this is broken down. So we start with our template, and we're in our purchase order template. And when we click on that, obviously, we have our listing. And then within the purchase order template, what we do is we collect the data in groups. And in software, those groups are called tables. So you can see we have a table for company information, purchase order details, field message details, our summary, purchase order, and so forth. And then within each table, we have a set of fields that are appropriate to that table. So for example, if I'm looking at company, then I have address 1, address 2, address 3, and so forth that are related to that table. And then further down, we have bookmarks, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then down at the bottom, we have some controls. So create a new template if you want a blank. And this one also shows the same. This is if you want to get to a listing of your template. So it just takes you to whatever folder you're storing those in. And again, that one does the same. You can work from the top or the bottom. This one actually closes the template that you're in. This does a save as. And because I'm in a standard template here, if I try to do save, it's going to force me to save as. It doesn't let us change the originating template. And then if I want to delete the template that I'm working on, be careful with this, then I can do that as well. All right, so let's just do a couple things to this template. And again, one of the challenges I think people run into with Design Your Own Forms is just the ability to navigate Word, because especially, when they're working with Jonas, a lot of the time it's accounting types, and we all spend a lot of time in Excel. We're all very proficient at it. We don't spend nearly as much time in Word. So typically, one of the most common questions I get from people when they're playing with this is, how do I put in a logo? Because, I could just go to Insert and pick a picture and dump it, but what's going to happen is because I've put my company address information here, it's going to skew those, right? Because it's going to try and put them, in a row. If I just dump it that way. So what I usually recommend people do, just as a little trick, is come over here, also under the Insert menu, but pick Text Box. And I like to just draw my own text box, and I put it here. And what that does is it creates a space, and it can be as big or as little as you want. You can get rid of the lines around it. So you have lots of flexibility, but now my cursor is there. And what I like about that is now if I go to Pictures, and I'll go to my desktop, and I'm sure I have a logo on here somewhere, it places it within the box for me, so it doesn't disrupt any of the other fields, right? And again, if I want to make it a little bit smaller, just so it isn't encroaching on other things, I can do that. And if I want to do something here, this was behaving differently, where I want to change format text box, and I can do things like for the line here, if I want to just say no color, for example, right? And what it does is the box is still there. It's doing what I asked it to do, but essentially now it's not visible, right? So you can't see what I did, and you can use that in a bunch of different places. I know for myself personally, and some people will put that in a header as well. One of the things I like to do when I'm placing information on a template like this is I prefer to put it into a table, especially when I have columns such as this. It's a really great way to keep the information segregated and landing exactly where you want it to land, rather than risking the possibility of it skewing or moving over. Like if you're doing it with tabs, for example, where if you get a really big return, it might shift everything over, that kind of thing on your output. So I find structurally it's a great idea to put stuff inside tables. Okay? The other thing that you want to be able to do, or that you can do when you're in here, is you can affect the way that your output's going to look. So for example, for my purchase order number, if I want that to be bold, for example, all I do is I highlight the purchase order number field that I'm going to be merging over from Jonas, and I can make it bold. I could also make it red if I want it to be really, really noticeable. If I want to, and I'm just going to remove a field here so that we can add it back, and you can see how we do that. So to add a field, all you do is you put your cursor where you want that to be. And this is actually our purchase order information. And then I'll look for reference, that's the field. And then all I would do here is I could either just double click it right from here, and that will make it populate, or I can highlight it and click on the green arrow, and that'll send it over as well. Okay, so I can get a field into play by doing it that way. So nice and easy. And then the last thing I wanted to mention while we're in here is what we do with bookmarks. So, and this is something that tends to confuse people, so I'm going to go through it carefully as possible. What you'll notice when you go into Design Your Own Forms is anytime you pick a table that has details in the description, when you click it, you're going to get a message. And what the message is basically saying is that the piece of information that you want me to merge into your template could have more than one data record, which means I could have more than one row. And for a purchase order, when you get into the details, obviously that makes sense. I could have 2 rows, I could have 20 rows, I could have 300 rows. And we have to let the program know that that's the kind of data that's going to be coming through in that particular line, so it knows to let it fill and take all of the data. By comparison, if I look at something like purchase order number, I'm just going to click OK here. If I look at something like purchase order number, obviously when it's merging over that particular piece of information, I have a single field that's going to be coming through, and that's it, right? I don't need anything other than that. But when I get into my PO details here, you can see obviously I have a number of things. So what we do, and I'll just take this out so you can see, what we do is once I've selected what all of those fields are that are going to be in this particular table, I just highlight the whole row, and I just click on the green arrow there, and that lets me know that it's going to have a bookmark. There's going to be multiple records, or at least the potential for multiple records that could be going in here. The other thing I will mention about data that has a bookmark attached to it is that it also has to live, it actually has to live in a table. So when I do single fields like ship to address up above, for example, if I just want to put that anywhere on the screen or on my page, I have an opportunity to do that, and the program doesn't care. But when I'm doing information that does have a bookmark associated with it, it's going to insist that it's associated with a table, and it has to be a unique table for that particular bookmark. And each bookmark, each group of bookmarks, or each row of bookmarks would have its own unique table. If I was in an environment where I have multiple tables or multiple groups of information that are going to be printing out. So, and then what we can do once we've done that, if we want to see what our changes look like right from here, then all we would do is we would click on our preview, and you can see what happened. We have our logo. You can see that my PO number is bold and red, just like I asked it to be. And the information down below has multiple lines associated with it. So at this point, I'm probably pretty happy with how my PO looks. I could save it. And as I said, it's going to do a save as because it's my standard template. So it's not going to let me overwrite what's there. So I'll just say save. All right, and then I'm going to close that document. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our file here, and I'm going to open up another document that we're going to be playing around with inside Jonas. So this is another purchase order. And this is one, we've been working on some new templates. So this is just a prototype of something that we're working on. So again, a more modern look to these in terms of, additional shading and fonts and that kind of thing. And I just wanted you to see this one because, as I said, we are going to be using this one in our example in Jonas. I'm going to close that. All right, let's go to Jonas. So once we're done with our template in Design Your Own Forms, then we have to let Jonas know that we're going to be using that particular template to print in this environment. So the first thing that we do is we let Jonas know that there is a template available. So we go into Administration, and we go to Design Your Own Forms, pick your company, and then pick the type of document that it is. And I'm going to start with purchase order, and then we'll talk about some of the other ones that are a little bit more complex. So you can see I actually already have this purchase order here. Very important that you have your file path. And the one thing I will mention about this, mine is on my C drive, which is a no-no, but I do work with this locally. None of you would. What I would strongly recommend that you do is place your templates on a drive where obviously everybody has access to them. Because otherwise what will happen is if you put it on your C drive and somebody else goes to print out a purchase order, they're going to get an error because they're not going to be able to find the file located on your C drive. And what Jonas does is it goes and it looks for where that file is located to build the template. So make sure that it's on a location where everybody can usually get to it. And in that instance, we usually recommend that you put it on your J drive. When we install Design Your Own Forms, we create a folder called Jonas Template Folder, and that's where we would recommend that you put them. All right, so I've come in here, I've created a forms code called Purchase. I've told it where to find my XML template. So I'm just going to click OK and go out of here. So that's there. And then all I would do is I would go to whatever module I happen to be working in or where I typically set up the forms for that module. So in purchase order, we happen to go into PO System Profile. And typically what we would do here is we would find the Design Your Own Forms purchase order. And obviously in purchase order there's a lot to choose from because we have a lot of custom ones in here. What I usually recommend people do is just hit F2 so you can do a word search. You can cheat. Just type in DYF. That will typically get you to the template that you want. And then when you come in here, you would pick the one that you're going to be using. One of the features that we added in 12.5 as well, added and then modified, was if you have more than one template for a specific form, when you're printing it is going to prompt you and it's going to say which form are we using this time. And the notion being that you may have different forms that you use in different instances, and it saves you having to come into these setup screens to change master files to do tasks, which you should never do. So basically the idea is that you would be able to select it as you go. If you only have one template, it should not prompt you. There was an issue where it did initially, but we changed that. All right, so I have my purchase order form selected. And then if you want to see what it looks like, I actually have a purchase order ready. I won't bore you with putting that together. And I'm just going to email that. That way I get it as an attachment. We can just take a quick look. So again, this is the one that we were looking at earlier. So this is my modern template, and you can see I have multiple records that came through, and then the appropriate information related to taxes, etc. All right, so that's my purchase order form. Now, there are, and anybody who uses this application knows, there's a lot of different forms in here that currently work with Design Your Own Forms. Let's just close that. That doesn't matter. But what I want to talk about are a couple of the forms that are a little bit more complex to set up. And they're complex on both ends. So if we go into Design Your Own Forms, and again, just with your company, and I'm going to start with the change order forms. So this is for comprehensive change order management. There are 4 possible forms that exist in that particular area of the program. So you have your customer quote cover for CCN, your quote breakdown, your subcontract change order. I apologize, there was 3. The breakout can be in summary. All right, so let's close out of here. So those are the different forms that you can have. There are 4, but I'll figure it out when I get here. When you go into change order management, if you're using Design Your Own Forms templates, what you need to do is don't worry about what's here, because as soon as we put anything into the multi-comp area, it's going to override what you've put on the front in terms of your form selection. So when you go down here, right, so you can see you could put in the form related to your sub RFQ. That was the 4th one. your CCN cover page, your breakout. So for example, I'll just show you one of these, not this one. Let's do the cover page. Right, so again, because I'm not going to, this is a really long list of forms. So I just typed in DYF so I can get to the one that I want the most easily. And then I'm going to pick the cover that goes with it. Right, so you would set them up that way. So the challenging thing with these is that you have to define them just as whatever type of change order document it is in Design Your Own Forms, and then you have to come here and link it up. And then the other thing that you'll notice here is that we have our job documents associated with project management, and they're done the exact same way. So here I have my RFI submittal and transmittal. And if I go back into Design Your Own Forms and I set that up here, and I go into my job documents, right? So when I come in here, I would indicate that it's an RFI, for example, right? So I would tell it what it is, or, you know, I would tell it that it's a submittal or it's a transmittal. And again, I would go and I would connect that in change order management so the correct forms print out. So a little bit more complicated, just because there are multiple forms that can exist under either of those. Some of the other forms that are in here, obviously in accounts receivable or not so obviously. AR forms design, so things like your job invoice can be Design Your Own Forms, your customer statement, your pick list can now as well. The parts invoice, no, but your counter sales invoice, yes, and that's done right in counter sales. Packing slips, obviously, as well. As I said, we added payment certificates and subcontract recently. All of your service contract and service billing forms, so your invoice quote, your work order ticket, your service contract invoice, service contract quote, those can all be done in Design Your Own Forms. We recently added your takeoff proposal form for in takeoff and job costing. All right, and I think the last one that was added was lien waiver, which you can get to in accounts payable. In your subledger under other. You can connect that one there. All right, so that covers everything that I had in mind to discuss as it relates to Design Your Own Forms today. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to be in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.